and welcome to Myth Monsters. My name is Erin and I'll be your host for these little snack bite-sized podcasts on folklore and mythical monsters from around the world. These podcasts focus on the actual cryptids, folklore and mythic monsters from global mythology, rather than focusing on the full stories of heroes and their big adventures. I'll also be dropping in some references that they have to recent culture and where you can see these represented in modern day content, so that you can learn more and get as obsessed as I am about these absolute legends of the mythological world. Firstly, I have to apologise for the late publishing of this episode. This is because on the 19th of March, I found out that I'm being made redundant from my job, and I was not in a good place, quite frankly. So I didn't get round to writing the show, let alone putting it out, and I was actually just trying to fathom how I'm going to survive without a job in this economy within that time. Thankfully, I'm covered by my redundancy notice for 3 months, so I have that time to sort my life out. But yeah, as you can imagine, I was a little bit worse for wear last week, so my apologies again for the lateness, and I hope you can understand. But enough doom and gloom of my reality though. For this week's monster, we are heading over to Japan for a stretchy-necked menace, the Rokurokubi. The Rokurokubi are typically described as normal people, usually beautiful young women who live amongst us. But at night, their necks extend to massive lengths and their heads go on an adventure of some sort, all whilst that woman is asleep. These heads go on a hunt for people who do not respect the Buddhist teachings, predominantly men, and they either devour, drain the blood, or absorb the vital energies of their prey. Now, I did just say they were typically women, but they can also very rarely be men. Male Rokurokubis hunt for female prey who have broken those same Buddhist laws, but they are not as reported on within Japanese folklore in comparison to the female counterpart, so I am going to focus on the female counterpart in this episode. These monsters are typically described as yokai, or demons, ghosts, supernatural entities in Japanese folklore. However, strangely and differently to any of these, they don't actually know that they are monsters. The Rokurokubi only remember small parts of their nightly, headly adventures as if they were dreams, and the person usually never finds out that they are one of these monstrous creatures. Sometimes you can see faint white marks on their neck, kind of like rings around them, to identify a Rokurokubi, but this is typically uncommon. So of course, when it comes to powers, it's kind of self-explanatory. They have the power to disguise themselves as usual people throughout the day and completely remove conscious thought of the affliction in the host body. They also have the power to stretch their necks to impossible lengths. And when I say impossible lengths, I mean they can go cross-country. And it's definitely possible to bump into a Rokurokubi's neck and never see their head or body. Lastly, they have the power to absorb energy, drain blood, or eat a person in full. Whilst there's not much written about their eating habits exactly, the assumption is that they have sharp fangs like a vampire and are able to stretch their mouths to consume whole people, like in horror movies, I guess. I will stress though, that although these monsters seem pretty evil, although justified in their own minds by being the fist of Buddhism, they can also be benevolent, but mischievous. There are records of Rokurokubi being annoying rather than evil, playing tricks such as drinking oil from lanterns, spying on neighbours, or intentionally spooking people with, a stretchy neck and a totally dismembered head. But how do you become a Rokurokubi? It's unfortunately usually something that someone has done to you, rather than something you can bring upon yourself. The Rokurokubi is known as a curse, usually for some evil or misdeed within your life, such as unfaithfulness or crimes against God or nature. However, usually this curse is passed on to the women in your life if you're a man. For instance, if your dad committed an evil act, as his daughter, you would be cursed to become a Rokurokubi, not him. Although those male transformations are not unheard of, it is more likely that it would be your mother, sister, niece, or daughter paying for your crimes as a man. Of course, if you were a woman committing these atrocities, you could potentially be turned yourself, or your male relatives or loved ones could be affected and transformed into those very rare male ones. It was actually super common to find Rokurokubi in brothels, because these women were separated when they slept from men who would report them, and they were consistently abused by unfaithful men, making it a prime hunting ground too. So, if you get caught or are hunted by one, how do you kill it? Well, there's really two ways, because they have two different forms. If you know a woman is a Rokurokubi, you could kill her in her usual form, whatever way you fancied, normal ways of killing a person. But you'd have to do it before sundown, so as to not evoke her monstrous side to come out and defend her. Whilst in a Rokurokubi form, her head and neck are completely invulnerable, but her body is defenceless. So you would need to find her sleeping body and destroy it with fire, and quickly before the neck retracts. However, if you generally keep your nose clean and not do anything evil or against Buddhism, you are most likely going to be safe away from her anyway. Their heads will generally not attack those unworthy of their punishment, and they will just turn away from you and move on. I generally wouldn't recommend attacking the head separately though, if it doesn't attack you, in case she counts that as a sin against her and just eats you anyway. Now, moving on to etymology, the word Rokurokubi is Japanese of course, and it's not 100% confirmed that we know the true meaning of it. However, what we do know is Rokuro is the Japanese word for a potter's wheel, a water's well pulley, or the handle of an umbrella, all of which elongate naturally. Kubi means neck, so it almost naturally translates into elongated neck, which makes sense, but you also get pulley neck quite often as well. I think this is a really fun one for etymology this week. I really like the ones that break down the word literally, so this is a favourite of mine. Their history and origins are also quite interesting. These monsters came from around the Edo period in Japan, which was around 1603 until around 1868, and is when most of our Japanese monsters make an appearance in history. Now, I've never really talked about why this has happened though. The Edo period was the biggest time for monsters in Japan because of a couple of factors. Mostly, entertainment was massive and realistically invented in Japan in this time, alongside the rise of printing technology, which gave way to exploring folklore and mythology in different ways than they were used to. It made way for stories and books, and it was also a time of relative peace for Japan, so people were naturally more relaxed, and no one was going off to war, meaning the population was higher than usual. So books and illustrations were being published right, left and centre about monsters and the supernatural, and people actually had time to enjoy them and consume it. Now, we believe the Rokurokubi was created in this time though because of religion, especially as this is a very woman-centric curse. This firstly put people off breaking any Buddhist tenets, because they knew that a horrifying woman with a stretchy neck would be after them, but to men especially, to give this curse to a woman in your family was not only dishonourable, but cruel. So it was naturally more of a deterrent to do bad things than anything else. Just, unfortunately, men almost escaped their punishments, and women took the brunt of the curse from it. Any good man, of course, would avoid doing it to avoid giving the women in their lives the brunt of the curse, and also avoid being hunted by this monster as well. I do also have a few popular legends about the Rokurokubi, such as the one about the landlord and the girl. The landlord had noticed that the oil in his lamps was being used very quickly, and he suspected one of his servant girls might be a Rokurokubi. He spied on her and saw that once she had fallen asleep, vapours and an ectoplasm-like substance formed around her chest and neck, and once she rolled over in her sleep, only her body moved. The next day, he fired her, and she was then fired from every single place she ever worked after. And the girl unfortunately never knew why she had such a bad reputation and luck with jobs, and she never found out that she was a Rokurokubi. Another story talks about a monk who eloped with a young lady called Oyutsu. Whilst travelling, Oyutsu became sick, and treating her would have cost all of their travel money, so the monk murdered her and stole the remaining money. On his further travels, he stayed at an inn owned by a man with a beautiful daughter, and the monk ended up sleeping with the daughter, and during the night her neck stretched and her face changed into his former wife. She then accused him of murdering her and obviously scared him out of his wits. The next morning, the monk confessed the murder of Oyutsu to the innkeeper out of fear, and the monk also told the innkeeper what he had seen the night before with his daughter. The innkeeper in return confessed that he too had murdered his wife for her money, and he used the money to build the inn. And as punishment, his daughter was transformed into a Rokurokubi, and he knew about it. Eventually, the monk rejoined his temple and built a grave for Oyutsu, and prayed for her soul every single day. Unfortunately, in this story, we never find out what happened to the daughter, but I imagine she's still out there eating horrible men's souls. You go, gal, that's true girl power. Now, in terms of cultural impact, the Rokurokubi were popular until the early 1900s, and would actually often be used in magic acts and freak shows throughout Japan. There was a report of a male Rokurokubi in Tokyo in around 1810, which was a super popular attraction, but many freak shows actually advertised a want for a real Rokurokubi during the Edo period. As a magic act, however, the Rokurokubi is more of a namesake and is still one that is practiced. The trick is that a doll without a head wearing a kimono is put in front of a curtain. There's a rope behind the curtain, and a female performer connected to it only shows the world her face. As she stands and squats, the fake neck stretches and contracts as if she were a Rokurokubi. It's quite hard to visualise, I must say, I've struggled with it. Now, there aren't many references we can find for this to be debunked with reality-based comparisons. Of course, we have the natural long neck items such as giraffes. However, there are a lot of mythical monsters, mostly from Asia, that are very similar to this one. The Nuke-kubi is the most similar monster within Japanese folklore, and you'll recognise the kubi there meaning neck. Nuke means removable, and instead of stretching, their heads fully detach and fly around on their own, doing the same thing. The Rokurokubi and the Nuke-kubi are very often put together, and even mistaken as each other and used interchangeably. I will make sure to cover the Nuke-kubi in another episode, but they are the exact same MO, just one detaches the head and one doesn't. In other mythologies, the Hitoban and the Rakutu from Chinese folklore are also very similar, but again it's floating heads rather than stretchy necks, as well as the Penanggalan from Malay folklore. They just have added entrails to their neck. And if we go past the neck and head region, we also have the Manananggal and the Layak from Filipino and Balinese folklore, who detach their whole upper torso to suck blood and eat people too, although both of these focus on pregnant women or fetuses rather than just bad adults. But let's move on to modern media. There are only a few bits that relate to the Rokurokubi within media, especially anime, so these are all of the bits I've found about neck-adjusting monsters across the globe. For art, I would really recommend having a look at Matthew Mayer's work, and he works on yokai.com. He really gets across how cool and weird all of these monsters look, but from a more modern perspective, and there's a lot of other independent art for this monster that is super cool too, so have a look on your DeviantArts and stuff like that. Otherwise, for actual portrait art, we do have a few, so have a look at Rokurokubi by Katsushika Hukasi from 1914. Rokurokubi from 1776 by Sekiyama Torin, and of course the Rokurokubi by Jippenshaw Iku. There is one last one, but I will stress that this one is not safe for work. The Rape of the Rokurokubi Yokai by Yutagawa Kinotora. That last one, of course, comes with a trigger warning and a very explicit material warning. It is quite pornographic, but it does get across what they look like if you're interested. Now, in movies, we have a handful. We have Miss Hokusai, Hellboy, Sword of Storms, Are We Monsters, and Pompoko. In TV, we have Yu Yu Hakusho, Rosario plus Vampire, Steven Universe, Ninja Sentai Cuckoo Ranger, Yokai Watch, Ren and Stimpy, Hell Teacher Nube, The Simpsons, the Junji Ito Collection, Inspector Gadget, Nura, Rise of the Yokai Clan, Pokemon, Tonari no Yokai-san, and Ushio and Tora. In video games, we have ones such as The Touhou Project, Little Nightmares 2, Pokemon, Minecraft, Tomodachi Collection, Ghostwire Tokyo, Nioh 2, Pathfinder, Demon's World, Ninja Amaki, Yokai Watch, Sable's Grimoire, On Mijo, Puppeteer, Me-Side, Monster Hunter, and Team Fortress 2. My book recommendation for this week is, of course, you probably know this if you listen to my show and like the Japanese ones, Yokai Attack, the Japanese Monster Survival Guide, and Yurei Attack, the Japanese Ghost Survival Guide by Hiroko Yoda, as these are just fantastic books. They're beautifully illustrated, and they're perfect for quick facts. I will never stop suggesting these. I'm sorry, but they're great. I have no other recommendations at this time. But now it's time for Do I Think They Existed? Honestly, I found this one a little harder to shut down this week. I think it's because of the human element of it and the unknowing of the cursed, and it makes it a difficult one to call. I also think because it's a punishment that is predominantly for men, but pushed onto women, is activating my feminist anger, and I can totally believe that this is how an ancient Japanese curse would work. And I feel very sorry for these women who have no idea that they have these abilities, but at least they get some kind of revenge in their nightly hunts. It's just sad they don't actually get to revel in them a bit. I also feel that naturally, monsters from Japan, because there are so many of them, and they are usually quite out there, it gives them a kind of believability. It's so far-fetched and insane that it's almost believable. But maybe that's just me, I don't know. I think this monster is actually really awesome. I can totally stan a lady who hunts bad men, who caused her to be cursed in the first place. That's what you get for cheating on your wives, you rotten scoundrels. I also keep thinking about all of the benefits of having a stretchy neck. You'd never have to do neck warm-up exercises before a workout. You could say bye to those annoying cricks in your neck if you sleep wrong as a person over 30. Sounds like a massive benefit to me. In conclusion though, I think this one is plausible, so I'm going to leave it open and say maybe. I think the big pull for that answer is that the victim/monster doesn't know that they do it, and that for me leaves the door open enough to think more than usual about the existence of this one. But what do you think? Did the Rokurokubi stretch their necks across the Japanese countryside? Let me know on social media, I would love to know what you think about this one. I thought this one was a super interesting monster from Japanese folklore as always, and I'm slightly jealous of this power. Imagine being able to eat out of the fridge without using your body to get there, or the lack of whiplash you'd get from roller coasters. I keep thinking of more benefits. Anyway, next week we're heading on over to West Africa and the Caribbean for a tricksy shapeshifter. We are looking at both the protagonist and antagonist folklore spider, Anansi, next Thursday. Obviously named after the band, not the other way round. For now, thank you so much for listening. It's been an absolute pleasure. If you enjoyed this podcast, please give it a rating on the service you are listening on. I've got loads of social media for any questions or suggestions on what monsters to cover next, and I'd really love to hear from you. The social media handles for TikTok, YouTube and Instagram are Myth Monsters Podcast, and the Twitter is Myth Monsters Pod, and I'm also now on Blue Sky under Myth Monsters. But all of our content can always be found at mythmonsters.co.uk, and you can find me on Good Pods, Buy Me a Coffee and Patreon if you want to help me fund the podcast too. Come join the fun though, share this with your pals, they might love me as much as you do. But for now, stay spooky. And I'll see you later, babes.